Greetings, children. Welcome to the online classes. This is Aishwarya. Please like and subscribe to the channel for the further updated videos. The following video is for class 4, subject General Science, chapter 8, where animals live. In part 2. In part 1 of this lesson, we learned about what is a habitat. What is a habitat, children? Habitat is a place where the animals can find their food, water, air, shelter, a place to raise their young ones, and safety from predators. It is a natural place. It's a place where an animal or a plant naturally lives and grows. That is a habitat. So, in today's class, we are going to learn about what is an ecosystem, what is the difference between a habitat and an ecosystem, and what are the different types of ecosystem. ECOSYSTEM, ecosystem. Once I explain what is ecosystem, you might get confused between confused with habitat and ecosystem. That's when, if you understand the difference between the habitat and ecosystem, you will know what is the proper habitat and an ecosystem. The ecosystem includes all the living and non-living things in a given area interacting with each other and also with their non-living environment. Okay, ecosystem means, now if you take, I'll give you one example. Before that, I would like to tell you to refer your textbook to page number 70 71. Today we'll be covering both the pages. Now, the ecosystem, as the explanation or as the definition says, it is the interaction between the living things, among living things, and the living things and the non-living things. What are the non-living things in a ecosystem? Like the mud, the sand, the rocks, they are the non-living things. What are the living things? The animals and the plants, different kinds of animals. The ecosystem or the interaction between all of these living and non-living things are called a ecosystem. Now let's take an example of a pond ecosystem. uh, let us look at the pond ecosystem to understand how there is interaction work. We may see sort of living things from microorganisms to insects and plants in a pond. In a pond ecosystem, there are many microorganisms. Microorganisms means the organisms which you cannot see through your eyes. They're very, very small. To insects, small insects also live in the ponds, and plants are also living in the pond. These living things depend on Now, these living things depend on non-living things like water, sunlight, temperature, nutrients in the water, etc. to live. The living things, that are the microorganisms, the insects, frogs, the plants, they depend on non-living things like water, sunlight, temperature, nutrients in the water, etc. to live. There is a balance in the flow of the energy and recycling of the minerals. Now, in any ecosystem or in earth, there is always a balance between the living things and the non-living things, and even among the living things there is a proper balance which has to be maintained. It is called the balance in nature. Okay, if that balance is in nature is disturbed, or if we are not able to maintain that balance, it can harm us only. That is why it is our responsibility to maintain that balance between the living things and the non-living things in the nature. There is a balance, as I told you. The energy flow along the food chain. You all learned about what the food chain is and how the energy is flowing, right? This balance also depends on other elements like rainfall. Okay, if there is no proper rainfall, the pond will dry up and there will not be any living things in that pond. That will affect the ecosystem of that pond. If it does not rain properly, then the pond may dry up. If it is too hot or cold, it affects the growth of plants. Thus, the interaction that living things have with each other and with their environments forms the ecosystem of the pond. Like this is just one example of a ecosystem. How there is interaction between the living things and living things, and living things and non-living things. That interaction in a given place is called a ecosystem. An ecosystem should contain producers, consumers, scavengers, and decomposers. Then it is a complete ecosystem. That means who are the producers? Producers are the ones who produce the food, the plants. Consumers, the animals who eat those plants. Scavengers, who feed on the dead. They are called the scavengers. Decomposers, they decompose the dead animal or the plants. Understood? So all of these people, all of these organisms are required in an ecosystem. Presence of all these means the food chain is complete and the energy flows in a cycle. Okay, the energy must flow in a cycle, but if it is just in one way, it becomes very difficult. The balance in the nature will be disturbed. Now we are going to learn what is the difference between a habitat and an ecosystem. And now you have understood what is habitat and what is a ecosystem, right? So we'll see what is the difference between the habitat and an ecosystem. Now, as I read out the points, one ecosystem includes more than one habitat. Habitat is the place where an animal or a plant lives. Naturally, it will take birth there and it lives there. That such kind of a place is called the habitat. But an ecosystem includes different animals and plants and even the non-living things. An ecosystem is always larger than a habitat. Habitat is a place where the animal lives, right? So it can be smaller when compared to the ecosystem. Ecosystem is always larger than a habitat. One habitat contains one or some types of animals, but one ecosystem contains all large number of different types of animals. Now if you consider, and the last point is, a habitat contains only a few levels of a food chain, but an ecosystem contains all the levels of food chain. That means an ecosystem has the producers, the consumers, everyone. But a habitat will have either producers or just a few levels of the food chain. So that is the difference between the habitat and an ecosystem. Now let us learn about the different types of ecosystem that is present on Earth. Now what is an ecosystem? It is nothing but the interaction between the living things and the non-living things in a given area. So the different types of ecosystems are desert ecosystem, forest ecosystem, grasslands ecosystem, wetlands ecosystem, Arctic tundra, freshwater ecosystem, and saltwater ecosystem, which you will be learning in the today's video and the next video also. So let's begin with deserts. What comes to your mind as soon as I say desert? It is very dry land, there is no water, it is too hot, the sand is too hot, right? Yes. Desert, it is the driest ecosystem. Driest compared to all other ecosystem, it is the driest ecosystem. In a desert, the annual rainfall is less than the annual evaporation. Annual means when you compare the throughout the year from the January to December, if you compare, the rainfall is much lesser than the evaporation. What is evaporation, children? Loss of water by the formation of water vapor in the presence of heat, right? When the water gets converted to water vapor, that's called evaporation. Evaporation rates are high because deserts tend to have very little cloud cover and there are strong winds, very strong winds. Okay, there be large sand dunes. Sand dunes means when the wind picks up the sand and it carries it for a long time, it's called the sand dunes. Okay, now that will be very disturbing, and if you are stuck between the sand dunes, it becomes very difficult for us to breathe also. Okay, so the evaporation rates are high because the deserts tend to have very little cloud cover. How we have cloud cover, right? There in the desert the cloud cover is very little. Rainfall is very rare. There is rarely rainfall. Thar desert in Rajasthan represents the desert ecosystem in India. In India, the desert ecosystem is represented by the Thar desert. Thar, Thar, Desert, desert. Here are some pictures of our Thar desert. These are the pictures in the Thar desert in Rajasthan. Which animal is called the camel of, sorry, which animal is called the ship of the desert? It's the camel, right? Now, because they can store water and they can live without drinking water for many days, they have adopted well. So this is about the desert ecosystem. The next ecosystem is the forest ecosystem. Forest ecosystem, it's the greenest ecosystem. Okay, a forest has a dense growth of trees. It has a very dense growth. Dense means many number of trees are grown. That is why it is called the dense growth of trees. Forests grow where there is enough water to fulfill the trees need. As you know, the trees need good water. Okay, wherever there is a proper supply of water, you can see the growth of plants, right? Like the rivers, or proper rainfall should be there, then only proper for trees will grow. The extent of the forest growth also depends on the temperature ranges, soil nutrients, adequate growing seasons, and altitude. Altitude means height, children. Okay, so the how well the forest can grow depends upon the temperature range. If it is too hot, extremely hot like the deserts, there'll be no more of trees. Then soil nutrients, soil also should have proper nutrient. Then adequate growing seasons and altitude. Then forests, these trees create a canopy that shades the forest floor and provides variety of habitats for many creatures. In forest there are many wild animals, different insects, and small microorganisms. They grow very well in the forest environment. Now there are three types of forest called the coniferous forest, rainforest, and the deciduous forest. You don't have to break your head for what these three different types of forest are, but I'll just give you a brief introduction about them. So the coniferous forest means here the plants are in cone shaped. Okay, that is what the coniferous forest mean. All the trees are in the shape of the cones. Then rainforest. Here the rainfall is higher compared to the other places. That is why it is called the rainforest. Then deciduous forest. As the word deciduous means what? The tree itself sheds its leaves down and then grows new leaves in 2 times in the year. So they are called the deciduous forest. Now, the remaining part of the lesson, we'll complete it in the next video, children. Stay at home, stay safe, take care of yourself, keep learning, do the exercises in your textbook and your workbook, and keep learning, children. Thank you.